It's amazing to think how far we've come as an events industry since March 2020. I probably shouldn't admit to this, but I frequently go back through old footage to see how companies, presenters and agencies put on virtual shows in the early days of the pandemic and how things have progressed. Gone are the days of 30-minute monologues, going are the days of 50-slide presentations, and making a steady, orderly exit are the days of speakers who start presenting with no idea what they're actually going to say. And I think we can take those good habits we've created and use them to inform how we go forward in the hybrid era. Our focus today will be to discuss how as an industry we deliver hybrid and what success looks like in that format. But for now, I want to start with a simpler goal of providing some definitions. For the purposes of today, we're going to say that virtual events are those where everyone is separate. Crew members remote from each other, remote speakers remote from each other, and audience remote from each other. So if we bring any of those groups together, we start to create hybrid meetings. I'm going to run through 3 versions: Studio, Match of the Day, and TED Talk. Let's start with Studio. In Studio, the first big win is to bring the crew together. It's been tough running events with remote show callers, PowerPoint operators in different counties and the like. Having everyone in one place really helps with the lines of communication and reduces complexity. It also allows us to get back to doing what we do best, fixing problems in the moment when they arise. But I would argue that the real benefit is for the speaker. We have been in a world where speakers have been in these digital boxes, hemmed in and being asked to manage quite complicated setups. But if we can get them into a studio, there's so much more we can do to get them to engage with their content and their audience. Let's talk about our 2 remaining models, Match of the Day and TED Talk. These are both formats we're looking to implement over the next 4 months or so. Match of the Day is the format that enables a no-compromise approach for remote and live audiences. Let me explain the problem we're trying to fix. In Jam, we can tell when someone puts another app or browser tab in the foreground in front of Jam. Don't worry, we won't reveal it now, promise you. But that data is very useful for telling us when typically audiences tend to drift. The biggest drop-off is when you overrun your time slot. 85% of your audience will leave within 30 seconds of overrunning. The next most common cause of drift is when your monologue exceeds 9 minutes. Don't ask me why it's 9 minutes, but that is what the data is telling us. So our virtual audience need content in sub 10-minute chunks, while our live audience would say, why are you only giving me 10 minutes of this speaker when I've traveled all this way to see them? They've only just got going. Match of the Day solves this. Think of the TV format. The audience in the stadium watch the full 90-minute game with the pasties and the travel and the queues and the disappointment and everything else, while the audience that aren't there in person have a different experience. The Match of the Day pundits work in a separate studio, reducing that 90 minutes down to highlights of about 10 minutes or so, plus providing additional commentary and analysis. You can see exactly how this would work in a business context too. You can see how this gives us the brevity for the online audience and the full experience for the in-person. But it does mean you're creating 2 versions of the content, and some presenters may have to do 2 versions of their presentations. Additionally, there is really no sense of connection, no moment in time when the 2 audiences, both remote and in person, are aware of each other's presence. The next format is the TED Talk format. Now, this means that everyone watches the same core content at the same time, but that we get speakers to prepare carefully, to land their messages precisely, and to structure their presentation in a way that gets people's attention, whether they're online or they're in person. It also allows us to give us a shared sense of occasion. And we actually think that we can extend this through interaction. And we're in the late stages of testing a version of Jam which allows people in the room to access the interactive elements through their phone, while the online audience would participate, as you all are now. I believe that these will be the primary type of hybrid events, but I do sound 3 notes of caution. First, organisers will need to rethink how much bandwidth they need for an event. You need, ideally, 200 megabits per second dedicated to just the production. So forget about what you need for the delegates for their phones or anything else. Forget about what you need for the event organisers, just for the production. Just to get the program out to the audience, you need 200 megabits. So you'll be shortlisting venues based on bandwidth and then choosing on other criteria. It doesn't feel to us like you can do the reverse, to choose the perfect venue and then to shoehorn in the bandwidth. Second, these shows will require a big production leap forward. Let me give you a really small example. There are so many of these that we're working through at the moment. In virtual, we've worked so hard to get our speakers to make eye contact with a remote audience because we know how positively it impacts that audience. Now, if our remote audience are now used to seeing the eyeballs of our speakers, we can't just sling a camera at the back of the conference hall anymore. No one ever looks at that camera, so we never get that eye contact. You're going to need the speakers in some sense to present to camera as well as to the audience. Third, in the end, you will need to prioritize your audiences. You might be able to please both of the audiences some of the time, but when you have to choose, you need to know which one gets your priority.